The next skill a leader needs in order to excel is strategic thinking. And we're going to unpack that by thinking first about, well, thinking. Leaders have a leader's mind. They simply think differently than non-leaders. Leaders tend to analyze constantly. They look at things from the perspective of what's good, not so good, and most importantly, how it can be made better. They ask how things are going and why. Leaders are forever making recommendations in their own minds about how to improve whatever situation they're in. Now, this is important, so let me say it again. Leaders are critics, not in the negative sense that they tear things down, but in the more neutral meaning of the word criticism. That is, they analyze their environment, recognizing what's well done and what's not so well done. Recognizing something that needs improvement, many leaders will then say something to themselves like, hey, if I were in charge, I would, do this or do that to make it better. In talking with many leaders, they have said that well describes them. They were surprised to hear that not everyone thinks that way. They assume that this is the way that everyone thinks. And realizing it's not the way that non-leaders think, especially those non-leaders in positions of leadership, explains a lot. Knowing the Peter Principle is helpful at this point. Now, this is a deviation from our main subject of strategic thinking, but it will help to get a better handle on why and how leaders and non-leaders think differently. The Peter Principle says that people tend to get promoted to the level of their incompetence. For example, let's say that Jane works at ABC Widgets. She starts on the assembly line. She's a good and efficient employee. After 2 years, she's promoted to lead assembler, does well there too. After another 2 years, she's promoted to shift supervisor, where her shift outperforms all others. So she gets promoted to director of operations for the entire factory, where over the next 5 years, everything falls apart because while Jane can lead workers, she can't lead leaders. She doesn't have the tools for that. She doesn't know how to coordinate differing systems. It would have been best for both Jane and the company she works for to leave her at her position as a shift supervisor. It was the highest place of her competency. But making her director of operations put her into a role that she was not capable of carrying out. You see, she was promoted to the level of her incompetence. The mistake was not hers, it was her supervisors who failed to properly vet her capacity to meet the needs of that new role. And it's a mistake that many organizations make. I share the Peter Principle because it points up the fact that leaders think differently than non-leaders. Realizing that it's important for a leader because it helps in guarding against a subtle negativism that can creep in when the leader sees things that need to change. When something is wrong and ought to be corrected, it's easy for a leader to grow impatient when it isn't. Knowing that others may not even see it needs to be corrected can help. It's the leader's call then to think about the best way to correct what needs correction. And I want to pause here to ask, does the following scenario apply to you? Is this you? Let's say you arrive at a resort for your vacation. You step into the lobby, you look around at how it's laid out, how it's decorated, deciding whether or not you like it. You note the scent in the air, the temperature, maybe how loud the ambient music is, the way that you're greeted by the staff. As you make your way to your room, you check out the landscaping. And while it's generally well kept, you note some dead leaves, some ragged bushes that need trimming. When you get to your room, you note that, everything looks great, except there's one pillow that isn't quite squared up. And here's the important part. You wonder why. Did a room attendant just not take the time with it, or did it slump of its own after the room was prepared? As I've shared scenarios similar to that with leaders over the years, there's been two consistent reactions that seem, kind of contradictory. They're surprised that I both describe what they do and that everyone else doesn't think that way. The problem is most leaders can't turn the analyzing off. They've done it for so long, it's become the way that they habitually think. Now, later, we'll talk about why it's crucial for the leader to turn it off and how doing so makes one an even more effective leader. The takeaway so far is this. Leaders think differently than non-leaders. They tend to analyze their surroundings, thinking about ways to improve. Now we talk about a particular way of thinking that makes leaders more effective, and that's the need that they think strategically. A vision, which we've talked about in previous episodes, will never be more than just, a nice dream unless plans are made to bring it to pass. Good leaders are able to break the vision down into practical steps and then chart a path to get there. Most visions take, years to accomplish. Turning them into reality means seeing concrete steps that can be taken toward its fulfillment. Maybe you've heard the old quip, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's usually said as a way to calm those who are overeager to complete a complex project. Rome's emergence as a world-dominating power was hundreds of years in the making. In truth, it was that long making that made Rome able to dominate the Mediterranean, Europe, and the Near East. The same is true for most visions. They take time to unfold, but they won't unfold apart from specific intentional steps that move the endeavor forward. We need to define two words here, strategy and tactics. Both important concepts in planning and achieving objectives, but they operate at different levels. Strategy is broad, long-term planning. It sets overall direction and goals. Strategy focuses on the big picture. It determines resource allocation, and it's typically set by top-tier executive-level leaders. Tactics are, specific short-term actions. They implement the strategy. Tactics deal with day-to-day operations. They focus on details and execution. Tactics are often carried out by, mid-level managers or frontline staff. In essence, strategy is about deciding what to do, while tactics are about how to do it. And another example may help. Strategy is the decision to vacation on the Greek Isles. Tactics are deciding which islands, how you'll see them, are you going to fly between them, or are you going to take a boat? And if you go by boat, are you going to book passage on a cruise ship, or are you going to take individual ferries between the islands and stay in hotels? The Apostle Paul, I think that he's a prime example of this strategic and tactical thinking. God gave him a vision of spreading the gospel and planting churches. He knew that the most effective way to do that would be to plant healthy churches at the nexus of major trade routes and cultural centers. He went first to the synagogues, since Jews ought to have been the most primed to hear and receive the gospel. He raised up local leaders and entrusted them with the work of growing the church. He's a brilliant example of strategic and tactical planning. Once you have a vision and mission, that is where you're going and the central values of how you're going to get there, think about what steps have to be taken in order to arrive at your destination. Today is where you are. The vision is where you're going. What's the first step that you need to take to move toward that future in which the vision has become reality? Once you identify that step, what decisions need to be made? What actions taken to put yourself in that place? Now, earlier I said that turning off the leader's distinctive tendency to analyze was important, and here's why. Uninterrupted analysis and critique, it fails to celebrate progress. And celebrating the successful completion of something is essential in leading others. Driven leaders are often perfectionists. When a project is complete, instead of celebrating the win, the perfectionist only sees the ways that it could have been better. This is the direction the leader's penchant for analysis can move, towards critique instead of commendation. Now think of a team of, let's say, a half dozen workers led by a supervisor. He's a good leader in the sense that his common sense and experience knows what needs to be done and how to do it. So they're assigned a major task that takes a year to complete. And along the way to the finished product, they have to complete several smaller tasks. As they do, the supervisor, instead of praising their work, he tinkers with little adjustments that don't really improve the overall project. At the end of the year, as the workers stand back to admire what they built, proud of what they've accomplished, the supervisor remarks that they could have done better if they had just done this or that. Yeah, right, they probably could have. But what they have accomplished is remarkable, and it's worthy of celebrating. The supervisor's failure to celebrate what ought to be commended means those people who've in fact grown as a result of working with someone so knowledgeable and experienced, they probably won't want to work under him again because, he's a level 3 leader maybe at times reaching a level 4 as he makes the project his bottom line. If that supervisor had only realized the opportunity the project handed him in developing the people on his team through and by the work that they did, rather than the product that they were assigned to produce, he could have risen to be a rare level 5 leader. So, leader, learn to turn off the incessant analysis and critiquing. Celebrate wins, both big and small, and do so with sincerity. Another reason suspending analysis is important is because one cannot genuinely rest when the mind is churning through options. So, leader, take a break. Give it a rest. Include a regular time for real rest in your schedule. You'll discover that you get more done by taking a regular break than by unending toil.